our system's an ear-based system, so we can get the eating and the rumination data, also the activity data for the fertility insights of it. We do have that additional parameter of a temperature because it is on the ear, and so all the dairymen always recognize that. It's the whole. We used to feel their ears to see if their ears are cold to know if they have a fever. Now, when you see a health alert, you get that additional piece of information, so you immediately already know if your cow has a fever or not.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of the really good metrics that we get. And then you just kind of start scaling all of those insights and features and sort gates. And you can really kind of expand it and unlock a lot more features just depending on what a dairy is interested in.
Hello, welcome back to the Dairy Podcast Show, brought to you by Wisenetics. My name is Barry Bradford from Michigan State University. Today, I'm really happy to welcome to the show Tara Bohnert from CowManager. Tara, thanks for joining today.
Thanks for the invite.
So tell us a little about yourself, if you would. Like, where do you live now, and how did you get into this line of work?
Yeah, I'm in Illinois, which isn't really a dairy-centric area. And so coming from the family farm that wasn't large enough when I got out of school 22 years ago now, I went to work in the industry. So spent 16 years on the reproductive consulting side of the business and really fell in love with Western dairy farm management. So a lot of my career has been focused in the West Coast. And then about 7 years ago, I was looking to change it up a little bit, and an opportunity to come into technology came into it. And being a cow person, that was pretty scary, but I'm really glad I took the leap on that because when you look at the consulting piece of it, that's just been a really great natural fit. So for the last 7 years, I've been working with sensor technologies and how to make that work and scale on dairy farms throughout the U.S., but still spending a lot of that time out in the West Coast area and up in the I-29 and down in Texas and everywhere, really.
So what's your typical week look like? You're flying somewhere for 2 or 3 days in the middle of the week?
It is a big blend. Yeah, there's some weeks that I'm out in the field, and obviously with travel time, that is a week out on the road. But there's a lot of times I'm running insights and really looking at some of the data on the dairies here behind the scenes.
Okay.
And we're always working on some of the newer features that are coming out and that we're working on developing. So I get to work with some of our partner dairies on looking at some of those different avenues as well.
That sounds exciting. You have like beta test farms, I suppose.
Yep. We have some farms that help contribute some additional data for us.
Neat. Okay. Well, we were chatting a little before we started here about how it's probably always been true, but it seems like even more common now. Every time I go to a farm, one of the first things that comes up is we can't find people, and there's all kinds of different reasons behind that. But that's like definitely pain point number one for almost every farm I know is just getting things done, right? So it's always like, what can we do to save labor or to get more out of the people we have? That's a big topic. So obviously you're part of those conversations, right? So how do you see that fitting in getting those conversations going?
Yeah, and I think that's a really cool evolution when you look at the adoption of technology. Technology like this is been around for quite a while on smaller dairy farms where that labor topic kind of became really important early on, right? Family farms where they're trying to do everything really went towards robotics and sensor technology to offer that additional labor source. And I think now with everything, it's harder not only to find people to do jobs, but to find that skilled labor part of it. So we are finding dairies now as they're getting larger and larger, kind of looking at, okay, so how can we manage these cows differently? What can we do differently? And when you obviously introduce a piece of data to the puzzle, you don't have to spend as much time in the corrals behind the cows. And so that's really where all of our conversations are going.
Yeah. So do you find, I guess, what aspect of management do you think it's having the biggest impact? Is it like finding cows before they're really sick so you don't have to put so many hours into trying to turn that around? Is it breeding is more efficient? Where do you see it hitting the most?
I think it hits different for every dairy. There's definitely some dairies that still can see some great reproductive gains from it. Preg rates have increased a lot my 20 years in the industry. So, 20 to 25 is a little different story now where we're trying to take dairies from 35 to 40. That's a different game. But we definitely have some dairies that are looking at more prescriptive use of the hormones on the synchronization programs. Although a lot of dairies, there's a lot of simplicity in those sync programs to get cows pregnant. But really, really what I focus on and where we can make the real difference is when we start looking at rumination data and health data and how we suddenly become very proactive versus reactive, particularly when we start looking at fresh cows.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe we should talk a little bit about it, the actual technology and the tools that are available now that maybe it's hard to keep up with, right? There's so much always changing. And then we can kind of come back to how you see farms putting those tools to best use. So like, what are the features now that people can get with the systems that you guys offer?
Yeah, our system's an ear-based system, so we can get the eating and the rumination data, also the activity data for the fertility insights of it. We do have that additional parameter of a temperature, because it is on the ear, and so all the dairymen always recognize that. It's the whole. We used to feel their ears to see if their ears are cold to know if they have a fever. Now, when you see a health alert, you get that additional piece of information, so you immediately already know if your cow has a fever or not.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of the really good metrics that we get. And then you just kind of start scaling all of those insights and features and sort gates, and you can really kind of expand it and unlock a lot more features just depending on what a dairy is interested in.
Gotcha. One thing that I think is interesting that I had to ask the first time I heard about it was like, okay, so how can something on the ear detect rumination? That seems weird, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how that works. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, eating and rumination are basically based off of cow movement, right? It's the sensors that are in there. So eating is head down motion because our dairy cows with the algorithms would eat on the ground level. So that's one motion where if you think about a cow that's ruminating, her head is more upright in a rocking type motion. And so there's all these fancy technology behind the scenes that can distinguish all those different things and movement versus high movement, and all of those different metrics. It's amazing. And the ear is so cool because the ear grows with the animal. So from our seat, with putting it on the ear, we don't have to worry about animals getting bigger. With animals getting smaller, we don't have to worry about losing them because the ear just grows out. And that's one of the reasons now why we can go from calf all the way through cow, is because we never have to remove that sensor. It's just naturally there.
So maybe you can tell us about like an example dairy or two that's sort of gone all in on tech and tried to use this to maybe make their labor, spread further or more efficient, incorporating the sensors with sort gates and that sort of thing. What are some neat examples you've seen?
Yeah, there's some really neat examples of, people getting in the systems in and first really evaluating the repro programs. And when we combine that, we've got several dairies now. I think when we look at XL dairies, or what CowManager considers the largest of the dairies, complementing the activity data with a sort gate is very natural because it brings the cow to you. And when we talk about managing by exception, that truly allows us to let the rest of the herd mates do their day and do their thing. So I would say the dairies that see the most will implement the sort gate into the protocol. But we have dairies now that are maybe implementing cows into shop protocols every day versus having a day per week. And they're finding, that eliminates some bottlenecks throughout the entire system on the dairy. Because if you think about that, and I've been looking at a lot of calving records lately, and you can tell the days of the week that, dairies are doing off sync because you see those slug days coming through with calves. And then the calf barn is dealing with, an influx of calves today. So when we can enroll cows on a daily basis, because it's simple to do, I think that's been a real defining part on the repro program. And then on the health side of it, it's the early detection. But with the early detection, we also have to put some systems in place as to what we do, because it's easy to go out and see a cow that's screaming symptoms to you, right? Like this cow is visually sick. But the tricky thing for some of these dairies is when we're showing them these early health abnormalities that are going on in the animals, like, now what do we do? So we really, those dairies will put in systems in place as to, looking at, is she a fresh cow? Is she further in lactation? We can kind of start an elimination process to help streamline that, so we can still do something for the cow. And then I think the next step is really looking at dry cows. I mean, nobody looks at dry cows. I remember the whole phase of my career, probably like 15 years ago, when calves were like the hot button, right? Like colostrum management was so important, and how do we take care of our calves? And the effect that on production later in life, how that calf gets off to an early healthy start. And I think the one piece that we're still missing as an industry is these dry cows. And there's so much going on in this data that I've seen for the last 7 years that we know cows that are going to have problems when they freshen. And like we know that once you get a lactation off to a bad start, you don't get that peak milk back. You never get it back. You have to wait and do it over again 365 days later. And
if she'll last that long, right?
if she'll last that long, right? Like now she probably won't breed back and she's not going to, there's going to be a more profitable cow to put in the herd. So now we're really working with those dairies who are like, okay, right, now we see the early signs. What do we do? And again, it's putting the right protocols in place.
I mean, that'd be an example of where, sort gate isn't as helpful with dry cows. And again, most people aren't touching them that much. But I know you guys have a feature now where the tag itself will flash, right? If a cow, how do you see people putting that to use? If they're not sorting, is that something people are using in headlocks a lot?
Yeah, it is. If somebody doesn't use the Sort My Cow feature, we have a lot of the larger dairies that are using the Find My Cow feature. So the original Find My Cow was just the option with the handheld locator that you could go out into a pen and it would kind of direct you if you're close or not close. And we still have a lot of people doing that. But the flashing light that we launched last year at World Dairy Expo has been a really big hit for that. So finding loose cows. And that's whether that's in the dry cow pen or everyone overcrowds. Like I don't think I go to a dairy that doesn't overcrowd. So for me, when we're out looking for animals and we're doing our daily chores in the pens, you always have to unlock cows and try to relock cows. Now you actually can have, I need that cow. There's this particular cow and I can see her from a distance. That really changes kind of the way that we work in the pens.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So have you seen, I know I've been given talks about some of the data on pre-fresh elk, like dry cows showing alerts and that like the predictive value of that for cows are going to have problems. Like from the controlled research literature, there's really not much I can say, look, somebody tried this on those cows and it helped, right? Because it hasn't been done. I think there's studies going on right now. But when you bring that up with people, what do you suggest in terms of an intervention, or what have you seen people doing?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of different approaches to that just from me as Tara, not as like, CowManager, because obviously we don't offer prescriptive options or anything like that. But what I see is there's two different ways that we're going to handle those cows. One is if you have the ability, like you said, a lot of dairies don't, but if you can go out and address that in the dry cow pen, a lot of times it's just a rumen stimulant. It's something just to kind of get that rumen going. And in some cows, if you give them a day or two, it'll come back on their own. But if you can help therapeutically, that's always a great non-invasive way to do it. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're putting these cows on a high-risk fresh list. So everybody in our maternity area now knows that this cow is high risk. And from the moment she freshens, she enrolls on a different protocol than what a typical cow would. And so now we're being very proactive versus waiting the 2 or 3 days and hitting her with everything under the sun. And we've seen a lot of success with that.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. I guess even if you don't know exactly which of these 8 things actually helped, it doesn't matter if it saves you a train wreck cow, it's worth it, right?
There was that time there where everyone hit their, fresh cows with everything. It seemed like, everyone had the whole huge list on every freshening. And now we've kind of backed off, which has been really good. It's good for the cows.
I agree.
But there are some cows that would still benefit from being more proactive there on the front end of it. And so now there's some cows kind of going back to that old model, and it's helping them a lot.
The next giant leap in dairy profitability is here. Introducing AffiColor Feed Efficiency Service from AffiMilk, the first sensor to accurately measure individual cow dry matter intake. Combined individual feed consumption with milk production data to get profitability insights never before available. Hear from producers who are using it to make a big impact on profitability and sustainability at affimilk.com. Evonik is committed to help supply a growing world population with healthy and affordable animal protein while prioritizing animal welfare, the efficient use of natural resources, and food safety. Evonik's expertise in low-protein diets and supplemental amino acids help ruminant farmers around the globe to enhance feed efficiency, reduce costs, improve animal health, and lower greenhouse gas and nitrogen emissions.
So, we've been talking mostly about how this helps sort of get chores done, right, and identify, sort of get ahead of things. But you talked about part of what you do is sort of almost data mining or looking for insights. That's a whole nother piece of this, right? Is thinking about whole herd management shifts based on data we're getting from these sensors. Do you have some examples of things that you guys have learned from doing that sort of data mining that have helped farms move forward?
Yeah, well, I think, the customer facing piece of the data is very operational for what we do on a daily basis. And with the insights that I'm working on now, all of a sudden it's like, let's bring in the entire team on the dairy. And here's some data pieces for the nutrition and nutritionist and the feed manager and the veterinarian. And what we're really looking at is a lot of feeding patterns. We're looking at different groups of cows and how they react to changes. And what we're seeing is just, some of those shifts that we can bring in other people to the conversation. Did cows have adequate feed? Was feed delivered when it should be? And a lot of it's what's the effects of these dry cows and how well they are being fed and how well they do make that transition through those 60 days. What's the impact of vaccinations during the dry period? We can kind of see where we can maybe spread out some of those tasks instead of hitting cows with everything in one day. And we see the effects of moving to the close-up pen and the differences in those cows behave. So to me, it's just really cool to look at that. And then as a dairy is on longer, we can start looking at year over year how cows perform, right? How is the heat stress during the summers? Is there more we can do to mitigate that for certain groups of cows? So we just kind of start building on it. And early on, it's just a small glimpse. But like say, as dairies stay on the systems longer, we can look more and more at all these different dynamic pieces of how the dairy runs. And for me, it's really cool to include the entire team, and that's different. Not everybody thinks of that, but I know if I was a nutritionist or a veterinarian working on a dairy, I would love to have this additional piece of information available to me.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, that's really cool. One thing that I don't know what the adoption rate of sensors is now. I usually say I think it's 70% or something in the industry. I mean, it's definitely, we're past the tipping point of it being a new, unusual thing, right? But I'm sure you still see farms that do really well onboarding the technology and really make the most of it versus those that invest in the technology and sort of use the bare minimum and have a lot of frustrations. Do you have some key points of this is what you have to do if you want to really be successful with this kind of tech?
Number one is you have to have team buy-in. So every system will fail when ownership management makes the decision to implement it and forces it down the employees. So it's a walk with them process to build confidence. To show the breeders how, we're not looking to take their job away. We're looking to make it differently. And there are definitely some cows that you bred this morning that would have been better off if we waited till tomorrow morning. And that's a tough one because we do get that. We'll get, breeders that'll be like, well, that cow wasn't on the list. And I'll be like, well, she's going to be on the list in 2 hours, and you would have been better off breeding her tomorrow, not today. So it's just showing them those things on how they can actually do their job better. And that's the big one, to just show them that piece of tools available to them.
That makes sense. I know I went to a nice presentation maybe a year ago where there was the point about, you really should have what was the term that was used? Like a guru on the farm who's like, this is my baby. I like this tech and I'm willing to suffer through troubleshooting with tech people from the company when there's that. Do you see a lot of farms do something like that?
I like to identify a champion on the farm who's kind of my go-to person because, I'm in Illinois. I can't be at every dairy all the time. So you'd like to have one person who's an advocate for you on the dairy. And then that way, too, they kind of make us all aware with employee turnover. Unfortunately, you train, but there's a lot of retraining. And there's a lot of new training that goes along in it. So, yeah, our champions on our dairies are vital to make it successful.
And then I guess one other thing I wanted to come back to is you talked about how it seems like in the past the early adopters tended to be small farms that were trying to avoid having any employees and just stretch family labor. And now we're seeing much more of the really big dairies sort of rely on this. Are there some things you observe in terms of how it's how the technology is used on the extremely large dairies, that's different or not really?
Yeah, I think so. I think the smaller dairies, it's much more operational. Like, okay, who do I need to breed today, and what do I need to do? And we're like that. Actually, we've had CowManager for 10 years on our dairy, and it's grown with us. And it's a great tool for us. I don't know how we would breed cows on our dairy without it. We don't walk, we don't chalk, we haven't for 10 years. So for us, it's one of our greatest employees, and so we see that differences. But with the bigger dairies, it is, like look at all the different rations at play on a dairy and all the different feed sources that they're using. And, what's the impact of introducing a new ration change or feed source to 100 cows versus 6,000 cows, and the impact is different. So I feel like every dairy can unlock all of the features, but definitely as we get bigger, we start looking at the full package with like that transition data we were talking about and the nutrition data. And there's that sweet spot size too, where we start looking at sort gates, and now we're looking at calves, which is a whole new, invaluable piece on the dairy with some information available on it too. So everything's there, but definitely, it's a cost versus return thing too. So I think every dairy has to sit down and weigh, are they going to make the changes necessary to make it a valuable contributor to their dairy operation, or is it just going to be a line item?
But I guess, part of it is the simple economics is fixing a 2% waste is a much bigger number on a really large dairy, right? So there's more motivation to dig and find those little areas that need to be improved.
Yep. Yeah. And we can dig in really on any dairy, but yeah, definitely as we learn to scale up, we have the volume of data that we can get so many more insights also.
So if somebody's not gotten into this sort of thing in the past and they just don't know where to start and it sounds exhausting, where do you point them? Where should they start looking at information?
Well, I think dairymen are always a great person to reach out to just to see what they're using out there for information. I know, like for CowManager, for example, we're going to be at the farm show out in Tulare and have the sort gate there so people can touch it and feel it. And I think that's what dairymen inherently always want to touch and feel it, right?
Yeah.
And that's so we like to give our dairies opportunities for that. So I know we always take dairies and have other dairies that have very open doors to go out and look at stuff. But definitely ask around and do some research, because there's a lot of options out there, and I really think there's old technology, there's new technology, there's people who are willing to be very early adopters and take some of those risks, and I think right now in the technology space, you're going to find somebody just on every piece of that scale.
Right.
And so you got to find what works right for your dairy, and at the end of the day, work with people that you believe in from the manufacturer of the company too.
So Tara, I know you mentioned that one of the new innovations is starting to use these sensors on calves. And have you seen some farms adopt that and make some big changes or strides in calf health and growth by putting that technology to use?
Yeah, definitely. When we talk about lifetime monitoring, the calves are a big important piece to it. And calves have been tricky for everybody. If you look at the technologies available, it just didn't make sense on a calf. And with their development changing daily, it's much trickier to do. But we can now do calves at CowManager. And the great thing is they can be suckling or bottle-fed calves. And what I see with the insights is we can really follow rumen development. We can see it in the graphs, and we can see that even in a group of calves, in a pure group, some of them have rumen development at different phases. The most exciting insight for me that I look at is really the stress around weaning time. I know when we say calves, most people immediately think of that crucial first 2 weeks, right, where calves can scour and have other problems. But what I dig into quite a lot is looking at the stress of moving to group levels and the pneumonias and different things that we miss. And I know I see that on all of our calves, right? We move from individual hutches, and then maybe we move to like a smaller group, and then they hit that bigger group, and then they're kind of a little bit out of sight, out of mind again, perhaps. And we see animals that start to fall behind in that group. And so this is just one of those early indicators that alerts you to those animals that aren't thriving as well as the rest.
Interesting. Have you looked at data from farms that are doing like commingling and pre-weaning? And is there anything you can pick up from that?
Yeah, we do have a dairy that does do that with the commingling, and yeah, you can definitely see the differences in the way that the calves thrive and the way that they develop in that. So it's really neat, and I think we're just going to learn so much more. I know I just have all these ideas on what we're going to do with this data when we look at maybe this is a better parameter for optimum weaning time, and maybe we can we're to the point now where we can start looking at effects on conception as heifers, and then we'll get to looking at the effects of their behavior as calves on production when they're lactating cows. So I think day to day, there's a lot of really neat things, and that's actually a place where the Find My Cow flash comes in really well. Is when you're walking by your calves and you see one that's flashing, and that alerts you that that calf needs a little extra set of eyes on them, and so that's really worked well for a lot of our dairies and calf ranches.
That makes a lot of sense. So the other thing I was wondering if you're investing or going ahead with the sensor in the calf, obviously they've got it through the first 2 years of life then. Do you see those farms shifting to more breeding on natural estrus then in heifers? Because I think they express estrus better than lactating cows on average, or do you not see that?
Yeah, we see a lot. Yeah, 100%. In that system, then yeah, those heifer breedings would be based off of the activities. And again, we can be way more prescriptive on what intervention we need to have on the heifers. And even if they don't have calf modules monitoring available to them, we see a lot of dairies that might not even have it on their cows, but will use a monitoring system on breeding heifers.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's not even just you think of it as creating that pregnancy, but it's what happens after you inseminate that animal, right? It's catching those animals that come back in heat, and it's all about being more efficient with our veterinarian, because our veterinarian's expensive to bring to the dairy, and they don't necessarily need to be arming as many cows all of the time anymore. So what dairies really find big cost savings of is reducing the amount of time that they have the veterinarian there to diagnose pregnancies, because these systems are just great at finding those cows that cycle back.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
It's time for our famous three.
Feed formulation software is stuck in the past. Most tools haven't evolved beyond basic least cost optimization. A Diet Forge changes that. It's an AI-powered platform with nonlinear ingredient modeling for enzymes and additives, cost per gain and maximum profit optimization, and real-time collaboration like Google Docs for nutrition. Every recommendation is grounded in world-class research, built for modern nutritionists who need more than legacy desktop software can deliver. Work seamlessly with your team and optimize the way modern operations demand. Try dietforge.ai free today. Feed formulation, finally modernized.
Okay, well, we've got our three famous questions that we have to throw at everybody, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what you have to share. Our first one, what is your favorite dairy-related book or resource?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't get to do a lot of reading. I definitely enjoy the publications that come out for reading material, like your Progressive Dairies and your Milk and your Hordes. But at the end of the day, I really enjoy the networking aspect of it and talking to people who have their boots on the ground and see what really is going on dairies. Yep,
learning from the people doing it every day. Makes sense. What about your favorite book or resource outside of ag?
Yeah, my favorite book is Good to Great, definitely. I think we have a lot of really good people in the industry, and it's important to put them in the right seat on the bus. So even within every company, it's just important that we maximize the talents of the people on teams.
Absolutely, especially as we get stretched.
Yes.
More and more, right, for people. Good. Last question. In your opinion, what sets successful dairy professionals apart from those who are less successful?
I think it's the people that are willing to ask the questions and to realize that not every dairy is on the same path. And that's a big one. Definitely, if you walk onto a dairy and you already go in there with a pre-described outcome that you're going and you only have one path there, man, that's just not going to work, because you can go to dairies across the road from each other and it's a different approach. It's different language, it's different values, it's different cows.
If you're not willing to stop and listen and figure out what that is first, you're not going to probably provide any solution.
Absolutely.
Good insight. Thanks very much. All right, well, Tara Bohnert, it's been a fun conversation. Thanks for joining on the podcast today.
Thanks.
This has been another episode of the Dairy Podcast Show, brought to you by Wisenetics. And if you're not following the show, make sure you click the button so you don't miss the next episode. And we'll see you then.
CowManager's unique ear sensor measures ear temperature combined with eating, rumination, and activity, resulting in more accurate and earlier alerts. With CowManager, you can catch sick cows days before they show clinical signs. Never miss a heat and unlock your herd's full potential. CowManager provides 24/7 real-time insights to help improve herd health, fertility, and overall performance. To learn more, contact your CowManager specialist at select sires or visit cowmanager.com.